We are working again today on looking at a graph and being able to figure out the unit rate and the equation that represents this graph line. Before we begin, what I'd like for us to do is just go over the steps that it takes to find the unit rate in the equation. When you take your EOG, you're going to have this memorized, the steps. So I'm hoping that looking at these clear steps and completing them over and over again, you'll have it memorized. So step 1, we're going to label the x and y axis. Step 2, you choose a coordinate that's along that navy graphed line. Then you label the coordinate, with x and y and labels like minutes and sit-ups or something like that. Step 4, fill in the unit rate formula, and then we divide to find the unit rate. And then step 5, we write the equation. And y equals kx is the proportional equation that we use, except for we replace k with what we found the unit rate to be in step 4. So let's go ahead and complete those steps. Step 1, we label the x and y axis. Step 2, we're going to choose a point. Now this is what I saw some kids doing the other day. I saw a child who chose this point right here, okay? Now, I don't know if you can get any closer to that line without being on that line, but that point right there is not a good point to choose because that point is not on the line. For it to be on the line, it means that that blue navy line has to go directly through it. And that little point is above the blue line. It's not on the blue line. So let me actually go ahead and delete that. So I'll relabel my x and y axis, and I just wanted to show you a little bit more carefully how to find a proper coordinate. So as you're tracing along, you want to look for where the two grid lines cross. Now right here, a vertical line goes through that, but not a vertical and a horizontal. A vertical line goes through this, but not a vertical and a horizontal. Again, a vertical line goes through that, but not both a vertical and horizontal. And bingo, I found the first point that I could use because we have a vertical and a horizontal grid line that goes through this point right here. So that's a point I could use. I keep tracing, and I only see one grid line going through it, one grid line, and here is another spot where I see two grid lines going through the point. And then I do not see any more. So there's only two choices that we have from this graph. So I'm going to go ahead and use, if you were doing this, you'd probably just want to use this one because it already says 20, 150. But I want us to practice the skill where we have one of them labeled, the 10, but then we don't have a label on over here on the y-axis. So we need to go down to the distance between 0 and 50 and count how many tallies there are in between. So this would be tally 1 and then tally 2, or you could think of it as we have one rectangle, two rectangles in between 0 and 50. So you just take 50 and divide it by 2, and we get 50 divided by 2 to be 25, so we're going up by 25. So count with me. 25, 50, 75, 100, 125, 150. It works. Counting by 25s works. So let me count again. 25, 50, this would be 75. So my point is 1075. So I'm going to record that up here. 1075. And then I'm going to label x and y. And it's always good to check. The 10 is x. The 75 is the y. Okay, I did that properly. And then the x is the hours. So I'll write that over here. Hours. So 10 hours. And then the 75 is along the y-axis, which is dollars. So 75 represents dollars. $75. And now that I've labeled my coordinate, I go over here and I fill in the unit rate formula. Let me grab another color for this. So the y value I'm going to fill in first. The y is in the numerator, and the y is $75. Let me grab another color. And then I'm going to figure out what x is. X is 10 hours, so I write that in the denominator, 10 hours. And then the fraction bar, the word that I'm going to put with a fraction bar is per. So this reads $75 per 10 hours. To find the unit rate, we need to actually divide. So we take the number 75 and we divide it by 10. Remember, the denominator goes on the outside. 10 goes into 75. That would be 7 times. 7 times 10 is 70. I subtract. I get 5. And since this is not 0, and there's no number to bring down, I have to add a decimal, put that decimal at the top, and then add a 0, and bring down another 0. Then I ask myself, how many times does 10 go into 50? 10 goes into 50 5 times. The answer to the question goes at the top. 5 times 10, the multiplication goes below. 5 times 10 is 50, and that's what you subtract. 50 minus 50 is 0, and there's nothing to bring down, and I got a 0 here, so the answer is 7.5 for my unit rate. So my unit rate is 7.5, and then I'm going to put D for dollars, P for per, H for hours. So $7.5 per hour. That's above minimum wage. And then part B, what is the equation that represents this graph? Well, we found K to be 7.5, so get rid of K, and instead of K, you're going to write 7.5. Now this is what I have a lot of kids do when they take their test for me. They write y equals 7.5, and then they say, oh, that's the equation. And they forget about the x. So just watch for that. Make sure you don't make that mistake. Y equals 7.5x is the equation. So we found the unit rate, we found the equation.